and we should all agree, riding a train shouldn't be a death sentence. Daily Wire co-founder Ben Shapiro joins me now. So Ben, why do you think the media deep sixes a story like this?
Unfortunately, Jesse, I think it's perfectly obvious why the media deep sixes this particular story. And the answer is perfectly obvious when you look at the races of the people involved. If this had been a black victim and a white perpetrator, then it would have led the news nightly for months on end. You would have had riots in the streets. If it's the reverse situation, the media will completely ignore it because it doesn't match up with their preferred narrative of a white supremacist country that is cracking down on black people, even though statistically speaking, obviously, the vast majority of crime is intra-racial, meaning white on white or black on black. Black on white crime on a per capita basis is significantly higher than white on black crime. That does not match up with the media narrative about white supremacy in the United States.
A bit about critical race theory. And it's my understanding that white privilege is not telling individuals that they cannot speak, but it is a term for societal privilege that individuals have as a benefit of their white skin. And I don't think that, and I think universities would be remiss to then say that because you're white, you're not allowed to say anything that's critical of white people. I didn't know that white privilege actually went into that sphere. My understanding is it's just, and the issue is that white privilege makes people uncomfortable to talk about the societal privilege that they have.
Well, to me, what I say on campuses all the time is if you want to cite instances of racism that we can all find and fight together, that's something that I'm more than willing to stand next to you and fight, because that's obviously stuff that we should fight together. But when you just say that there is a white privilege out there in the ether and that by dint of birth your skin color generates for you an advantage, what you're really saying to people is that your view is less valuable because you have not experienced what I've experienced. And that is an identity argument, that's a character argument, that's not a rational political argument that can actually be taken on in any way. It's more of a cudgel and a club than it is an attempt to open a discussion.
Well,
every day, innocent Americans are being attacked, robbed, and even murdered. Yet instead of telling the truth about who is committing these crimes, the media hides behind their favorite buzzword, white privilege. Tonight, I'm exposing the hypocrisy and standing with Ben Shapiro's powerful arguments. But before I begin, make sure you click that subscribe button so we can keep spreading the truth together. If the roles were reversed, if a white criminal harmed a black victim, it would dominate the headlines for weeks. Protests, marches, endless coverage. But when black criminals target white victims, the silence is deafening.
Do you also feel like they're sensitive to being called racist by their friends, family, and colleagues for highlighting black crime?
There's no question about that. In the echo chamber that the legacy media live in, if you even mention black on white crime, then you are immediately seen as racially discriminatory in some way, because the basic idea on the left is that white against black is really the story of America, as opposed to blacks committing crimes against white people. To even mention that is to undermine the entire narrative of the 1619 Project, for example.
By re-releasing these people out into society after 11, 12, 14 prior arrests, isn't there something about self-preservation? The judges and the DAs alone, why would they do that? Why would they turn these people loose over and over again?
It's ideologically horrific. I have a book called Lions and Scavengers about the mentality that suggests that if somebody is acting badly, they must be a victim. And that is the mentality that undergirds all of this. When you hear the mayor say that you can't incarcerate your way to safety, that is precisely wrong. You absolutely 100% can incarcerate your way to safety. We do not have an under-incarceration problem in America. We have an under-incarceration problem. We need these people locked up for longer periods of time. This particular person should have been involuntarily committed for mental illness. He had violent schizophrenia, or he should have been in prison for armed robbery, which he had been convicted of in the past and done, I believe, 5 years in prison already for.
So we had a big crackdown on crime in the 90s. Clinton and Gingrich kind of took control, and crime rates did go down significantly. There was some blowback over the last couple campaigns because a lot of that was crack versus cocaine. They thought it was racial. But let's take the drugs out of it. Just on violent crime, should America go back to those types of tough sentences?
Absolutely. There used to be a man named Joe Biden, and back when he was a senator in the 1990s, he was very much in favor of actually imprisoning criminals. And then when he ran for president, he decided that he'd been wrong all along. Well, actually, Joe Biden, before he was brain dead, was actually right. He was right back in the 1990s, and Americans found that out when New York turned from one of the least safe cities in America to one of the most safe cities in America, specifically because of harsh crime policies in the city of New York and all over the country.
So the resistance you're seeing from these politicians, especially Chicago, because they're the worst, is this about not wanting to be exposed as feckless? Because they have just not been able to reduce crime significantly during their time in office. If Trump comes in and is effective, doesn't that just blow their whole case up?
It doesn't just blow up their case and their case against President Trump. It blows up their entire worldview. Their entire worldview is that crime happens for deep white supremacist systemic reasons. And if it turns out that crime happens because you're not doing the most basic thing, arresting and imprisoning people who commit the crimes, then their entire worldview is just wrong. And it turns out that personal responsibility and putting bad people in jail is the best way to keep your citizenry safe.
So the media is playing a big role in this. You see it with Chicago. They think it's like going to be, I guess, troops coming in and just slaughtering innocent civilians. And you see it by the way they cover this case in North Carolina. It's a Republicans pounce. Why is this framed as Republicans pouncing?
Well, that's always the narrative. The way that it works is if a Republican does something wrong, the Republican doing something wrong is the story. If a white person does something wrong, the white person doing something wrong is the story. If a Democrat does something wrong, it's Republicans pouncing. It's the Republican response to the story that's somehow the story. It's a great way of avoiding the actual real problem here, which is, innocent people being murdered on trains because of horrible and feckless and gutless and terrible governance.
Right.
Why? Because it doesn't fit the media's agenda of portraying America as a nation ruled by white oppression. This double standard isn't just dishonest, it's dangerous. While innocent white families mourn their loved ones, activists lecture the rest of us about white privilege. But what privilege is there in being attacked on a subway? What privilege is there in being murdered while commuting home? The real victims are being ignored because acknowledging their pain would shatter the carefully constructed narrative pushed by elites and media outlets. Time and time again, repeat offenders, many with a dozen prior arrests, are released back into society. Judges and prosecutors bow to ideology instead of protecting law-abiding citizens. The result? More bloodshed. Ben Shapiro is absolutely right. America doesn't suffer from too much incarceration, it suffers from too little. Criminals should face real consequences, not revolving door justice. We've solved this problem before. In the 1990s, tough-on-crime policies reduced violence dramatically. Cities like New York became safer when law and order took priority. But today, politicians would rather cling to the myth of systemic injustice than admit the truth that enforcing the law works. Ben Shapiro is right. Personal responsibility and accountability are the only way forward. The truth is simple. Innocent Americans, many of them white, are suffering while politicians and media elites talk endlessly about white privilege. The real privilege is being shielded from accountability while communities pay the price. It's time to stand with facts, not lies. Click that subscribe button now and let's keep fighting for justice, truth, and the safety of every American family.